In this video, I'm going to talk about and contrast two different approaches to sustainable supply chain management: a risk minimization approach and a value creation approach. Supply chain risk is always a very important problem for companies. They need to make sure that they don't run out of materials so that they stop the production process. Supply chain risks can be due to disruptions within the supply chain. It can be due to problems, logistical problems, communication problems, and so forth. But sustainability also presents a very significant supply chain risk for companies. And it's primarily driven by a need for companies to comply with regulation, to stick within the law, but also to make sure that they don't get exposed in the media. If they get exposed in the media, it can have strong implications for their reputation and for their brand, and therefore have a negative impact on sales. We're also going to look briefly at a company that derives value from the way it has designed a sustainable supply chain. Now, global sourcing is a sourcing strategy which is very often driven by cost reduction. Particularly, a lot of companies have chosen to source globally from so-called low-cost countries. Now, clearly they can significantly reduce their cost levels. For example, when they source from low-cost countries where the difference in labor costs is very significant. But sometimes sourcing from low-cost countries can also come at too high a price. Consider, for example, the example of the factory in Bangladesh that collapsed. More than 1,100 people died. Now, in addition to the significant impact on human life, this also had a negative impact on the companies that chose to source from this supplier. As we talked about before, supply chain management focuses on end-to-end supply chain management. Companies need to try to integrate their entire supply chain. They need to make sure that they exchange information about demand, about stock levels, about capacity, and so forth, so that this information travels right across the supply chain. But the problem is that, particularly when it comes to sustainability, few companies actually have complete visibility beyond their direct suppliers or first-tier suppliers. And when it comes to sustainability, we see companies that don't have visibility over, for example, the social conditions of suppliers, of sub-suppliers, that is. So, for example, for a lot of companies, they do not know whether their indirect suppliers, the sub-suppliers, employ child labor or slave labor. They don't know, they can't control if their suppliers employ workers that don't have a contract. They don't control whether these workers are paid below the minimum wage, and so forth. Similarly, it's very difficult for companies to control 100% if their suppliers within the extended supply chain comply with environmental regulations and standards. So, for example, do sub-suppliers pollute the environment? Do they use dangerous materials or ingredients, and so forth? Consider the example of Nestle and its Kit Kat. Kit Kat is a very strong brand, a very well-known brand, but Greenpeace ran a campaign on YouTube exposing Nestle's use of palm oil for the production of Kit Kat. Now, palm oil is a very controversial material because it's linked to the destruction of forests, including rainforests, that are a natural habitat for a range of different critically endangered animals, such as the orangutan. So Greenpeace focused in on this particular problem and caused a significant problem for Nestle that subsequent decided to take action and eliminate the use of palm oil in all its products. But sustainability as we talked about at the beginning, can also be a source of value creation. And one of the ways in which companies can do that is to make sure that they provide complete visibility of sustainability issues right across the supply chain. So for example, providing visibility of the materials or the ingredients that are used in the products and making that visible to end customers. So one example of a company that has done this very well is a company called Icebreaker. Icebreaker is a company based in New Zealand, and they produce outdoor and sports clothing. Now the product, the clothing, is produced from a natural material, merino wool. Merino wool comes from merino sheep that of course are a natural source in New Zealand. What Icebreaker does, which is very clever, is that they include what's called a barcode, not a barcode as we typically know it, but a barcode, as in the noise that the sound that a sheep makes. They include this barcode in their clothing, and when you buy an Icebreaker product, you see the barcode, and there's a message that says, trace the source of your products. Icebreaker encourage customers to go onto their website and type in this unique number. When you do that, it will take you, it will trace the original farm in New Zealand where your product is produced from. So by doing that, you can see exactly the source of your product, and you can watch little video clips that show the conditions of the animals. It will show the conditions of the farmers, and so forth. Now, Icebreaker do that because they want to have a positive impact on the environment, but they also do that because they derive commercial benefits. They create value because of this supply chain design. So Icebreaker's products are typically a little bit more expensive than competitors, but because they are customers who appreciate, who value this particular kind of product, it has a positive benefit for Icebreaker, and it gives Icebreaker a competitive advantage in what is a very competitive industry. So to conclude, sustainability presents a significant supply chain risk. This is something which is normally driven by companies that need to comply with regulations to stick within the law, and it's also driven by companies' wishes not to get exposed in the media. There have been a lot of different reports of companies in recent times, and the reputations, the impact on reputation and on brand can be significant. But we've also seen an example of a company, and there are other examples, of a company that derives value, commercial benefits from the way that it designs a sustainable supply chain. So in other words, to have a sustainable supply chain need not be a risk, but can also be a source of value creation.